Forgive me. Clara Bennet barely had time to look up before Duke William Ashford made the most reckless decision of his life. The winter engagement reception at Ashford Hall had been arranged with merciless precision, every candle lit, every glass polished, every guest positioned to witness the announcement everyone already expected. Lady Victoria Caldwell stood beside the Dowager Duchess in silver blue silk, composed enough to look as though she had been born for the role waiting for her. At the far end of the ballroom, a family solicitor unfolded a document containing the proposed wedding date. William felt the room closing around him. 37 years of duty had taught him how to stand still while other people decided what was reasonable for his future. Another 30 seconds, and silence would become consent. He turned away. Conversations faltered as he crossed the ballroom and disappeared through the side doors toward the conservatory passage. He needed air, distance, one moment in which nobody called him Your Grace while telling him what he must do. Clara was coming the opposite way, carrying a carefully wrapped gown she had repaired for one of the household guests. Her dark wool dress was plain, her gloves inexpensive, and a few melting snowflakes still clung to the shoulders of her coat from the servants' entrance. She stopped when she saw him. Your Grace. William heard footsteps behind him. Victoria, her mother, several curious guests. They had followed. Clara glanced toward the sound, then back at William, already sensing she had stepped into something that did not belong to her. Is something wrong? She asked. Everything was wrong. William saw Victoria approaching through the glass doors, expectation written beneath her perfect composure. He saw the solicitor behind her. He saw his mother. Then he looked at Clara, a stranger with no part in any of this, standing exactly where desperation had placed her. Forgive me, he said. Before she could ask why, William leaned forward and kissed her. It lasted only a moment. No tenderness, no lingering closeness, only shock. He stepped back immediately. Clara did not move. Her brown eyes widened, not with romance, but disbelief. The wrapped gown nearly slipped from her hands. Behind them, someone drew a sharp breath. William turned. Victoria stood in the doorway. The Dowager Duchess had gone pale. Half a dozen guests stared as though the walls of Ashford Hall had shifted beneath them. William, Victoria said. Her voice was almost frighteningly calm. He should have stopped. He should have apologized. He should have admitted that panic had made him cruel. Instead, trapped by the consequences of what he had already done, he made it worse. You wanted to know why I cannot marry you. Victoria's gaze moved slowly toward Clara. William followed it. Now you know. Silence settled over the passage. Clara finally looked at him, and whatever confusion had filled her face disappeared. In its place came understanding. Cold, immediate, complete. He had not kissed her because he wanted her. He had used her because she happened to be standing there. The guests began whispering. Victoria turned away without another word. The Dowager Duchess followed her. William remained where he was, already aware that he had escaped one announcement by creating something far more dangerous. Clara placed the wrapped gown carefully on a nearby table. When she spoke, her voice was quiet enough that only he could hear. Your Grace, whatever you thought you just saved, I believe you used my life to save it. Then she walked past him, leaving William alone with the first consequence of freedom he had ever chosen for himself. William found Clara the next morning in the small workroom near the servants' entrance, where winter light fell across bolts of fabric, wooden spools, and a half-finished hem. She was seated beside the window, repairing a torn sleeve with such steady concentration that for a moment he almost believed the previous evening had not happened. Then she looked up. The calm in her face was worse than anger. Miss Bennet. Your Grace. He placed a small leather purse on the table. Clara's gaze moved to it, then back to him. What is that? Compensation. The word sounded wrong as soon as he said it. For the work you may lose. For the inconvenience. For what happened? Clara set down her needle. Inconvenience. William's jaw tightened. That was poorly said. Yes. She rose, not quickly, not dramatically, but with the dignity of someone refusing to be spoken over. You kissed me to save yourself. I know. No, Your Grace. You know what you did. You do not yet know what it costs. He remained silent. Clara touched the purse with 2 fingers and pushed it back toward him. Tomorrow, you will still be the Duke of Ashford. People will call you reckless, perhaps selfish, perhaps even romantic if the story becomes entertaining enough. Her voice stayed quiet. Tomorrow, I may lose customers who believe I encouraged you. I may lose work because respectable households do not want a woman with gossip attached to her name. If I deny what happened, they will say I am ashamed because you rejected me. If I say nothing, they will invent something worse. William looked at the purse between them and understood how small it suddenly seemed. I did not think. That is the privilege you had. The words were not cruel. That made them harder to hear. He glanced toward the window, where servants crossed the yard beneath a pale sky, each carrying on with work that would never be discussed in drawing rooms. What can I do? Clara gave a faint, humorless smile. You are asking me to solve the problem you created. William lowered his eyes. You are right. For the first time since entering the room, something in Clara's expression softened, though only slightly. That is a beginning. He picked up the purse. Then I will not insult you with money. Good. But I will correct the story. Clara looked at him sharply. Be careful. Why? Because every sentence you speak becomes heavier than mine. William understood what she meant. His denial could destroy her as easily as his silence. Then tell me one thing only. Did you want any part of what happened? Clara's answer came without hesitation. No, William nodded once. Then that is the truth I will carry. By noon, Ashford Hall was already alive with whispers. By evening, the first letters had left the estate. Somewhere beyond the gates, the story was becoming larger than either of them. William stood alone in his study while snow gathered against the windows and realized that Clara had been right about something else. He had spent one reckless moment trying to escape a life chosen for him. In doing so, he had taken choice away from someone with far less power to recover it. By the following afternoon, the story had already changed shape 3 times. In one version, Clara had been secretly meeting William for months. In another, she had planned the entire encounter to embarrass Lady Victoria. A third claimed the Duke had finally chosen love over duty, which would have been almost amusing if Clara had not lost 2 customers before breakfast. One letter arrived from a household in Belfield canceling a fitting. Another was returned unopened. Clara read both in silence, folded them once, and placed them beneath her sewing basket. At Ashford Hall, William received different consequences. His mother called the incident humiliating. His solicitor called it politically inconvenient. A family friend called it romantic. No one called it costly. Not for him. William understood the difference more clearly with every conversation. By evening, the Dowager Duchess summoned him to the blue sitting room. Lady Victoria was already there, seated near the fire with her hands folded perfectly in her lap. You will correct this, his mother said. William remained standing. I intend to. Victoria looked at him. And what exactly will you say? He hesitated. That hesitation was enough. She gave a small, bitter smile. If you deny affection, you destroy her reputation. If you confirm it, you destroy the engagement. The Dowager Duchess stiffened. There is no engagement to destroy until it is formally announced. There was an understanding, Victoria replied, which is apparently worth less than a moment of panic. William accepted the accusation without defense. I was wrong. Victoria's expression shifted, surprised perhaps that he did not argue. That does not repair anything. No, he looked toward the fire. But I can prevent Clara from carrying the blame. His mother's voice sharpened. You will not speak of that girl as though she belongs in this discussion. William turned. She belongs in it because I dragged her into it. The room fell silent. The next morning, a brief statement left Ashford Hall under William's name. It did not deny Clara. It did not claim love. It said only that Miss Bennet had behaved with complete propriety, that the responsibility for the incident belonged entirely to him, and that any suggestion otherwise was false. The statement slowed nothing. Society preferred mystery to truth. By the end of the week, gossip papers were calling Clara a hidden favorite and William a rebellious romantic. When Clara read one of the notices, she nearly laughed. Hidden favorite, she murmured. You barely knew my name. William, standing several feet away in the workroom, looked uncomfortable. That appears to be the problem. No, the problem is that now everyone believes you do. He had come with another proposal, though this time there was no money in his hand. My mother has suggested a practical solution. Clara's expression immediately cooled. That sentence does not inspire confidence. Despite himself, William almost smiled. Ashford Hall needs additional sewing work for the winter season. You would be hired as a paid seamstress under Mrs. Whitaker's supervision. You would have proper wages, private quarters, and no obligation beyond the work itself. Clara stared at him. And the real reason? If you remain here temporarily, the story that we have been acquainted for some time becomes less destructive than the story that I kissed a complete stranger. So now we improve one lie with another. Yes. William did not soften it. And I dislike that answer as much as you do. Clara turned toward the window. Outside, snow covered the narrow road leading toward Belfield, where another canceled order meant another week of uncertain income. How long, she asked. Until the gossip loses interest. And if it does not? William met her eyes. Then I will carry that consequence too. Clara studied him, wondering whether a man born with almost unlimited choices could truly understand what carrying consequences meant. Finally, she nodded. I will take the work. Nothing more. Nothing more. Neither of them understood yet that the lie meant to protect her reputation was about to place them close enough to discover truths neither had intended to learn. Clara had been at Ashford Hall for 9 days when William realized she had mastered the rhythm of the house without ever trying to belong to it. She worked in the bright sewing room near the East Gallery, where winter light fell across folded linen, dark wool, ribbons, and half-finished gowns. She arrived early, spoke politely, completed every task, and disappeared before dinner whenever she could. She never wandered where she had not been invited, never lingered near the drawing room, never used his name to gain favor. If anything, she seemed determined to prove that proximity to a duke had changed nothing about her. William found that strangely difficult to ignore. One afternoon, he entered the sewing room carrying a torn cuff from one of his coats. Clara looked up from a hem. Mrs. Whitaker can send that to the valet. She could. Clara waited. William placed the coat on the table. I was nearby. Her brow lifted slightly. Your study is on the other side of the house. He had no answer ready. Clara returned to her stitching. Leave it there, Your Grace. William should have gone. Instead, he stood beside the window watching snow settle across the courtyard. Do you hate me? The question surprised both of them. Clara's needle paused. No, you answered quickly. I do not know you well enough to hate you. William laughed before he could stop himself. It was brief, but real. Clara looked up, clearly surprised. Was that amusing? Painfully. She resumed sewing. Good. He remained another minute, then left with the uncomfortable realization that he wanted to hear her speak when she was not defending herself from him. Over the following days, small things began to collect. Clara noticed that one of the kitchen maids had been charged for broken china she had not damaged and quietly helped correct the account. She repaired an old cloak for a footman's mother using leftover fabric no one else wanted. When Mrs. Whitaker complained that the servants' corridor remained freezing at night, Clara suggested moving an unused coal allowance from the guest wing, which had been empty for weeks. William heard about each incident only because other people mentioned them. Clara never did. One evening, he found her carrying a stack of finished garments toward the storage room. Allow me. She looked at his outstretched hands. You are the Duke. I had noticed. Dukes do not carry laundry. Perhaps that is why they are so often useless in corridors. Clara stared at him for half a second, then unexpectedly smiled. It changed her face completely. William took half the stack. They walked in silence until they reached the storage room. You are trying very hard, Clara said. At carrying linen? At not being the man you were that night. William stopped. The humor left his expression. Is it working? Clara considered him. Sometimes. That answer stayed with him longer than praise would have. Later, as the house grew quiet, William passed the sewing room again and saw Clara alone beneath a lamp, mending a child's coat that did not belong to any guest. Whose is that? He asked from the doorway. A tenant girl's. Are you being paid? No. William leaned against the frame. Why do it? Clara threaded the needle carefully. Because Cole does not care whether someone can afford good stitching. William looked at her, and something inside the false courtship shifted. He had expected gratitude from a woman he had inconvenienced. Instead, he was beginning to feel grateful for every moment she allowed him to see the world from where she stood. The first invitation arrived on a Thursday morning, sealed in cream wax and carrying the name of one of the oldest families in the county. It was for a winter charity gathering at Belfield House, and William read it twice before setting it beside his untouched breakfast. Clara had been at Ashford Hall nearly 3 weeks. The gossip had not disappeared. It had simply changed from scandal into curiosity. Society wanted to see them together. Not because anyone cared whether Clara was comfortable, but because people preferred a story they could examine in person. "We should decline," Clara said when Mrs. Whitaker brought the invitation to the sewing room. William, standing near the doorway, answered before the housekeeper could. "If we decline, they will assume the worst." Clara looked at him. "They already assumed the worst. Then perhaps we should give them something less imaginative to discuss." Her expression warned him not to enjoy his own cleverness. The evening of the gathering arrived beneath a clear, bitter sky. Belfield House glowed with lamps and music, its rooms crowded with guests who tried not to stare when William entered with Clara several steps behind him. She wore a simple dark blue gown altered from one of Mrs. Whitaker's older dresses, modest and carefully fitted, with no jewels beyond a small silver pin that had belonged to her mother. William noticed immediately that she looked uncomfortable with being noticed. "Stay near Mrs. Whitaker if you wish," he said quietly. Clara glanced at him. "I thought the purpose was to make our acquaintance believable, not at the cost of making you miserable." Something in her face softened. "You are learning." Later, during the charity supper, Clara found herself speaking with Mr. Daniel Harper, a young solicitor from Belfield who had known her father years before. He remembered Thomas Bennet's careful handwriting and asked after Clara's work with genuine interest. Clara laughed at one of his stories, the sound easy and unguarded. Across the room, William stopped listening to the man beside him. Daniel leaned closer only to hear her over the music, yet William felt something tighten in his chest. He disliked the feeling immediately. He disliked it more when Lady Victoria noticed. "Mr. Harper seems taken with her," Victoria said beside him. William kept his gaze forward. "He is being polite." "Of course." Her tone suggested she believed neither of them. On the carriage ride back to Ashford, Clara sat opposite William beneath the dim interior lamp. Snow reflected pale light through the windows. For several minutes, neither spoke. Then Clara asked, "Why were you angry?" William looked at her. "I was not angry." "Then you are very bad at looking indifferent." He turned toward the window. Mr. Harper was overly familiar. Clara almost smiled. "He asked about my father." "For a long time. That happens when people have conversations." William looked back at her. Clara held his gaze, and the silence between them changed. The false courtship had required them to stand near each other, speak politely, and allow society to invent affection. But nothing in the arrangement had prepared William for the unpleasant realization that he wanted her attention when it was freely given to someone else. "You have nothing to be jealous of," Clara said softly. William answered too quickly. "I am not jealous." Her smile finally appeared. "Then I am relieved." He knew she did not believe him. Worse, he was no longer certain he believed himself. The morning after Belfield, Clara found Lady Victoria waiting alone in the East Gallery. Winter light stretched pale across the floor, touching the edges of portraits and the dark green silk of Victoria's dress. Clara slowed. "My lady." Victoria looked toward the windows. "You need not sound afraid. I am not here to quarrel with you." "I am not afraid." That earned the faintest change in Victoria's expression. "No, I suppose you are not." Clara waited. "I saw you with Mr. Harper last night," Victoria continued. "And I saw William watching you." Clara's hands tightened slightly around the folded fabric she carried. "His Grace and I have an arrangement." "Yes." Victoria's smile was tired rather than cruel. "So did we." Clara looked at her more carefully. For the first time, Victoria did not appear like the polished woman society had prepared to become a duchess. She looked like someone standing inside a room with no door. "My father's estate is failing," Victoria said. "A marriage to Ashford would settle debts, preserve land, protect my sisters, and satisfy two families who decided years ago that William and I were sensible together." Clara said nothing. Victoria turned toward her. "Do you imagine I dreamed of being traded for stability?" The question struck harder than accusation. Clara had spent weeks believing Victoria represented the cage William wanted to escape. She had never considered that Victoria might be locked inside another side of it. "I am sorry," Clara said. "Do not be. I do not need pity." Victoria's voice steadied. "But understand this. William did not only embarrass me that night. He used you to avoid telling the truth to people he feared disappointing." Clara felt the words settle. Later that afternoon, she found William in the library reviewing correspondence. "Did you know the Caldwell estate is failing?" He looked up slowly. "Yes." "And the engagement would help save it?" "Yes." Clara placed the fabric she had been carrying on a chair. Then Lady Victoria was never simply an obligation. William's expression tightened. What did she say to you? Enough. Clara moved closer to the desk. You were trying to escape a cage by putting me inside one. The sentence stopped him. She continued before he could defend himself. Your family was using you to solve a problem. You used me to solve yours. William looked away. For several seconds, the only sound was the fire shifting behind the grate. You are right. Clara had expected resistance. The admission unsettled her more. Then ended. He looked back at her. The false courtship. Her voice remained calm. End it before it becomes another arrangement built on someone having less power than the person making the choice. William stood. If I do, the gossip will return to you. Then tell the truth. They will blame you anyway. Perhaps. Clara met his eyes. But this time, let the truth be mine too. That evening, William summoned his mother, his solicitor, and Victoria. He did not announce love. He did not defend the scandal as romance. He said simply that Clara had never sought his attention, that the story of a secret courtship was false, and that he alone had created it to soften the consequences of his own mistake. The Dowager Duchess called it disastrous. Victoria closed her eyes briefly, then nodded. Clara watched from the doorway and understood that William was finally doing something he had avoided from the beginning. He was allowing the cost of his choice to fall where it belonged, on him. And for the first time, whatever was growing between them no longer needed a lie to keep it alive. The night before Clara was scheduled to leave Ashford Hall, the house seemed quieter than it had in weeks. The false courtship was over. The gossip had not vanished, but the truth now belonged to both of them, and William had finally stopped asking Clara to carry what he had created. She packed slowly in the small room Mrs. Whittaker had given her, folding 2 plain dresses, her sewing tools, and the silver pin that had belonged to her mother. There was no reason to stay. That was what made leaving difficult. Near midnight, Clara carried one final bundle of finished garments to the east workroom. William was there, standing beside the cold fireplace with a letter in his hand. He looked as though he had been waiting. I thought you would be asleep, Clara said. I thought you would leave before I found the courage to speak. She set down the bundle. You have been speaking quite a lot lately. Not about the right thing. The room held only one lamp, and its light softened the severe lines of his face. William folded the letter and placed it on the table. I am sorry. Clara gave a faint smile. You have said that before. I know. I said it first because I wanted forgiveness. I say it now because I finally understand why I did not deserve it yet. Clara looked at him. He continued. I used you because I was afraid to confront my family. Then I tried to repair the damage by arranging your circumstances again. Even when I meant well, I kept deciding what would be best for you. And now you are leaving. His voice lowered. And I am not going to stop you. The answer touched something in her that persuasion never could have. Clara looked down at the folded garments. I believe that first kiss would be the thing I remembered most about you. William's expression tightened. And now, she lifted her eyes. Now I remember that you learned to be ashamed of it. He absorbed the words in silence. Then he stepped closer, slowly enough that she could have moved away. He stopped with several feet still between them. Clara. Yes. May I? She knew what he meant. No audience waited beyond the door. No engagement needed to be escaped. No lie required evidence. For the first time, the question belonged entirely to her. Clara studied him for a long moment. Then she crossed the remaining distance herself. Yes. The kiss was brief and gentle, more promise than possession, and William stepped back before the moment could become anything she had not chosen. Clara's eyes remained on his. That was different. It had to be. She almost smiled. You asked. I should have the first time. Silence returned, but it no longer felt dangerous. William looked toward her packed sewing case near the door. You are still leaving tomorrow. Yes. Pain crossed his face, but he nodded. Then I hope wherever you go, no one ever makes you feel you owe them for being treated with respect. Clara's throat tightened. And what will you do? William glanced toward the dark windows. Learn whether I can become the man I should have been before you ever walked into that passage. Clara took her sewing case. At the doorway, she paused. Good night, William. It was the first time she had used his name. He looked at her as though the single word had given him more than any promise could have. Good night, Clara. She left him standing beneath the quiet lamp, and for the first time since their lives had collided, Neither of them needed a lie to explain why the other mattered. Clara left Ashford Hall at dawn beneath a pale winter sky, carrying one traveling case, her sewing box, and no promise from William that he would follow. He watched from an upstairs window until the hired carriage disappeared beyond the bare trees. Every instinct told him to go after her. For once, he did not. Clara had asked for freedom without ever using the word, and William finally understood that love could not become another elegant excuse for deciding her future. The weeks that followed were not gentle. His mother pressed him to restore the arrangement with Lady Victoria before the scandal became permanent. His solicitor warned that several political allies had already withdrawn their support. Letters arrived from families who had once considered Ashford above reproach. William read each one and accepted the cost. Then he asked Lady Victoria to meet him privately in the library. She entered with the same composure she had worn the night everything began. "I assume this is about repairing what remains of our engagement." "There is no engagement to repair." Victoria's eyes hardened, but William continued. "You deserved the truth before I made a spectacle of avoiding it. I do not love you, and asking you to marry me because our estates benefit from it would be another form of cowardice." Victoria looked toward the fire. "My father will not thank you for discovering principles this late." "I know. Neither will your mother." "I know that too." A tired smile touched Victoria's face. "At least you have become consistent." William met her gaze. "I will not allow anyone to claim you were rejected because you were lacking. The failure was mine. I should have refused the arrangement honestly from the beginning." For the first time, some of the tension left her shoulders. "And Clara?" William was quiet. "She left." Victoria studied him. "You did not stop her?" "No." "Then perhaps you have learned something after all." The announcement that followed was brief. William publicly accepted responsibility for ending the proposed alliance and repeated that Clara Bennet had never pursued him, manipulated him, or sought advantage from his title. Society still talked. It always would. But this time William did not soften the truth to protect himself. He also made no attempt to summon Clara back. He sent no gifts, no money, no grand declarations. Instead, he turned his attention toward the estate he had nearly endangered through years of passive obedience. Contracts were reviewed. Workers' wages were corrected. Several household positions were reorganized so that servants could report grievances without risking dismissal. None of these decisions would bring Clara back, and that was precisely why they mattered. Nearly 2 months later, William received a short note from Mrs. Whittaker. Clara was well. She had found rooms above a small shop in Belfield and was working with an older dressmaker whose eyesight had begun to fail. William folded the note and placed it in his desk. He did not go to Belfield. Not yet. Across town, Clara spent her days cutting fabric, fitting sleeves, and rebuilding a life that belonged entirely to her. Occasionally, she heard news from Ashford. The engagement had ended. Lady Victoria had returned to her family without public humiliation. William had accepted every whisper without placing Clara's name beneath it. She told herself this was merely what decency required. Yet some evenings, when the shop grew quiet and snow gathered beyond the windows, she remembered the way he had stepped back after asking permission. She remembered that he had let her leave. And slowly, against all the caution she had built around herself, Clara began to understand that the greatest proof of William's affection was not that he had finally learned how to hold on. It was that, when loving her required it, he had learned how to let go. By early spring, the rooms above the Belfield dressmaker's shop no longer felt temporary. Clara had earned enough to replace the cracked mirror, buy better thread in bulk, and place her own small sign beside the older woman's name downstairs. Nothing about the life was grand. That was why she trusted it. Every customer she kept had chosen her work. Every coin she earned belonged to effort rather than favor. She was pinning the hem of a pale morning dress when the bell above the shop door rang. "I will be with you in a moment," she called. No answer came. Clara straightened, removed the pins from between her fingers, and stepped into the front room. William stood near the door. No ducal carriage blocked the street outside. No servant waited behind him. He wore a dark coat dusted with spring rain and carried nothing in his hands. Clara stopped. "Your Grace." His expression softened. "William, if you still permit it." She looked at him for a long moment. "You came alone. I thought that was important." The older dressmaker glanced between them, wisely gathered a basket of ribbon, and disappeared upstairs. William remained where he was. He did not approach. I heard the shop is doing well. Better every week. I am glad. Clara folded her hands at her waist. Mrs. Whitaker writes more than she should. She writes exactly enough. A small smile passed between them, then faded into something quieter. William looked around the shop, at the bolts of cloth, the measuring ribbons, the careful order Clara had built for herself. The first time I kissed you, I did not ask. Clara's breath caught slightly, though her face remained composed. No, the second time, I asked. You did. William nodded. And the third time, I am going to do something more difficult. Clara waited. I am going to stand here and let you decide whether there should ever be one. Silence filled the little shop. Rain tapped softly against the window. Clara searched his face for the old impatience, the reflex to arrange an outcome, the confidence of a man accustomed to doors opening when he reached them. She found none of it. You waited a long time, she said. I needed to know whether I could become someone you might choose without trying to make the choice easier for you. And have you? William gave the faintest smile. That is not mine to answer. Clara looked down, then toward the street where ordinary people passed beneath umbrellas, unaware that a duke was standing inside a dressmaker's shop waiting for permission to hope. Lady Victoria, she asked. Free of me. Clara nearly laughed. William continued. Her family has arranged new financing without marriage attached to it. My mother is still disappointed in almost everything I have done. That sounds more familiar. It does. He grew serious again. Clara, I did not come to offer you rescue. You have clearly managed without it. I came because I still care for you, and because if there is any future between us, I want it to begin with nothing you owe me. Clara felt the last of her caution shift, not vanish, but loosen. She stepped around the counter. William did not move. One step, then another. She stopped close enough to see the rain caught in his dark hair. You said you would wait. I will. Clara smiled. Then you have waited long enough. She rose slightly and kissed him, brief and gentle, because this time the choice began with her. When she stepped back, William looked almost startled. Clara's smile deepened. That was different too. Yes, he said quietly. It was. Months later, when they finally spoke of marriage, there was no urgency, no bargain, and no audience waiting for an announcement. The first kiss had been an escape. The second had been permission. The third became something neither rank nor scandal could manufacture, a choice freely returned. And William understood at last that the kiss which changed everything was not the one he had taken in panic, but the one he had finally learned to wait for.